in Latin America. Get started. Thanks everyone for being here. Based on Councilor Frausto's email, I'm assuming she is not planning on being here today. She hasn't asked for an excused absence, but we can go ahead and extend that to her. Councilor Vasquez has asked for an excused absence. She is not feeling at all well and would like to be excused from today's meeting. So I think that if there's no objection, we can go ahead and excuse her.
Karen, but
I think it'd be okay for Vicky as well. She did send her concerns in an email to everyone.
Well, and she did notify us, and I think
Did
that's.
notify us in that
now
regard.
when we voted on whether to have this or not, Vicky said yes, and the day before
And
she
Vicky and I
no.
said no.
Yeah,
I think
Well,
we should
it's-
just give her
it's-
an excuse
It's
her.
council's choice, but I would be in favor of excusing her. She had to voice her objections and
And she did.
they were, for her perspective, legitimate. And so, out of
I
respect.
can agree with
vote.
that, but part of leadership is to be here to lead.
Yeah.
And that, I think she's abdicating her leadership when she doesn't show up.
if
to
she has a
meeting.
personal opinion, she's, that's fine.
All right, well, let's take a vote then in favor of, and we'll just go down the line. Favor of granting Councilor Frausto an excused absence, yes or no? Councilor Hancock,
No.
Councilor Ripley,
No.
Deputy Mayor,
No.
Councilor Hart.
Yes.
I too vote yes. Motion to the chair. The noes have it. She is not granted an excused absence. All right. So today's meeting, the purpose is to begin a conversation on some strategic planning. Obviously, we've been in a bit of a disarray for the last few weeks, and all of that is still up in the air. However, one of our roles and the principal role of us as council members is to serve the community and to do some serious long range planning and have some serious discussions about what we are trying to implement, what we want to see in service of our community. We were placed in these chairs to serve our community, and that's what we need to focus on today. So we're going to talk about planning. Mr. Bridges has put together an agenda, which you've all had an opportunity to look at. And so let's focus on that today. That is our purpose. We'll have to have another meeting on Monday night to talk about other issues. But today we're going to focus on some planning issues, some questions that we have that we need to deal with. This is something that has been up in the air for some time. I know we've talked about the need for some planning. So this meeting was in response to that. If we have a meeting today and then we end up with another planning session sometime later, August, September, whatever, that's fine. But we need to start having these conversations because we've let some things go a little bit longer than they should have, and we really need to try to get things back on track. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bridges. He's got some materials planned for us, and the whole goal is a conversation. So, Mr. Bridges.
Jim, I don't see it in my email.
Oh, let me,
Send it again.
okay, yeah, I'm sending it right. Give me 1 second. Does this count as violating the phone?
No, it's not ringing, so we're fine. It just has to be. Sorry, I'm a part of a group that we meet every week, and that's one of the ways that we raise funds for our social activities is making sure everybody turns their phone off, and not everybody remembers, so we get sometimes some pretty good funds.
Give me a second here.
And we're all business owners, and we all get phone calls almost incessantly. We have 2 parties a year now as a result of that.
Ooh,
We just had one up at Whistling Jack. That was a lot of fun.
On the 24th.
there we go. Had it on all caps and it didn't want to let me in.
Did I get an email that says this is changed to the community center?
Huh?
You want it on the screen?
Yeah, go ahead and put it on the screen, please. So first of all, let me say, thank you again for this opportunity. I don't have any fancy PowerPoint presentation to put on. I don't even have a laptop to do this. So, the documents that I passed out, and does anybody need another copy? I have extra copies here.
Yeah, I would like a
Yeah.
printed
I'd
copy.
sure like to have one.
I got highlighters here if anybody wants to highlight.
Oh, that's nice. I love highlighters.
Hey,
Again, I found everyone in City Hall I could find.
they used to be kind of ubiquitous, but not as much anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So the first document we're looking at is, this is basically, it's our memo to start the project here and kind of my approach to this process. And I'm not going to read this thing word for word. It's on the screen. I think we've all had a chance to read it. Basically, my approach is planning, goal setting is all done with the respect to the future budget and future budgets that are out there, right? And that's basically because if we identify, long range pie in the sky things, they don't necessarily fit in the budget, right? We need to stick to what we do as a government. And right now with the state of the city's budget, it's really kind of hard to look too far in the future because we don't know where we're at currently. And so I'm just going to really focus down on the 6 bullet points in the middle. What is it we are trying to accomplish? This is all with respect to the budget. I'll start with that first paragraph. Therefore, we prepare for the community vision, plans, and objectives. It should be with respect to the preparation of a preliminary budget, and it is important that we keep in mind the following items. What is it that we are trying to accomplish? Do we currently have the resources available to accomplish it? Is it a procedural change to current operations that are currently funded? Does it require something completely new? And if so, is it sustainable? Is there a funding source for it? Which ones are short-term and which ones may be long-term? What kind of results can we expect and are they readily reportable? And I think that's the key. Whatever we do, however we spend the public's money, how do we present to the public that we spent it in a fashion that they expected us to spend it to or how it was approved, right? And so those may be in the form of statistical results, as I say in the memo, is it crime reports, police and ambulance, fire calls, those type of things, permits, those are easily extractable. The other things that are hard to pinpoint is just the look, the appearance of something that stands out to the public, our appearance of our parks, our appearance of our public buildings, our vehicles, those type of things. So, that's the what we're trying to accomplish here is how does the city, does the public see that we are accomplishing the things that they want us to accomplish. So anyway, so then the rest of this memo goes on to state, kind of gives you some basic information on funds. And I'm not sure how many of the council members are aware of the funds and the that we have and where the money goes to and how it can be utilized. So and that's where this I have more pages than this. Yeah. So that's where, excuse me, we need to look forward to essentially, well, I've lost my train of thought there. So I'll come back to it. I apologize. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll move into, the next document. And again, I didn't prepare a PowerPoint presentation for this. And when I sent this out, this was just, as the mayor said, this is to start a conversation. These were actually ideas that I presented to council and the council had adopted when I was interim city manager in 2009, 2010. I don't think a lot of these things have changed to some extent, and some of them have. But as we look at this, we look at the community vision. Is this a community vision that we still want to strive for? Sunnyside will be a safe and friendly community, which will strive to develop a stronger sense of identity characterized by the active involvement of its citizens, the businesses and the government in all aspects of community life. Is that a good, community vision statement? If it's not, then, we need to develop, we shouldn't get hung up on it, as with respect to the budget, but this is, I think, something that we put forward to the city, right? To the public. This is our community vision. So if you have other ideas, certainly, you can jot those down, write those down. We can, and as the council goes through these processes, we can narrow this down. And the next part of it is the Sunnyside government will be increasingly financially or fiscally responsible to provide more effective basic municipal services and to foster regional cooperation and local partnerships. And I think that's a key, right? Understanding our fiscal health. If we don't understand our fiscal health, then all the planning that we do is really meaningless. It's just going to end up in what I say later on is reactionary, just reactionary action items to that as a person comes to the council meeting, hey, we want this and we want this, or they come to staff and it's a mishmash. No one knows what's going on. It's just one-off. Everything's a one-off thing. And that's not good fiscal responsibility. That's not a good way to manage our time and manage our money. And especially when it comes to the time of the staff, right? Because, once staff starts going one direction, that's not really a goal or a policy action item, then they get derailed and then they start spending resources and time and effort that may not be best spent that way. Some of them may be worthy efforts, but it's not necessarily, everything that we do should be based on a policy that's been presented, that's been adopted, and those policies are adopted through the budget, right? So then we look at the community goals, to have a safe, clean, comfortable, and healthy environment, to be physically connected and involved in the community with a strong sense of identity, to have attractive residential neighborhoods and business districts, to retain a friendly small town atmosphere, to maintain a fiscally self-reliant government with effective basic municipal services. And I use that word basic, right? Because where we're at, everything we should be doing, what do we provide on a basic daily level to our community, right? Everything beyond that is, a want. Let's focus on our basic needs. Once our basic needs are covered, if we have monies left over, then we can look at our wants and prepare goals and policies that and those wants will be a more long-term goal. And so I put this on the next page is elements and objectives. And so as we go through this, our land use, right? And this is how as we develop this, how they fit within a budget framework. So our land use, right? A balanced small town. Land use patterns that minimize conflicts, availability of a range of housing types, identifiable city boundaries. So let's look at that one real quick. Identifiable city boundaries. So when Sunnyside was formed, it was carved out of the county. And as it expands, as we annexed in portions, and some of those portions might maybe skipped over or have a block of county in between, and those type of things. And so this is where our city services kind of, are we providing service through this location? I mean, it's a block away and it's a block of a county in between. And so it gets confusing, right?
And actually, you got to be real careful there because it's not legal for us to have to create an island. So we actually have to have continuous land boundaries. We cannot create an island somewhere. We have to annex the whole in order to be able to do that. So there's laws surrounding that we're not allowed to create an island.
Absolutely. But they still somewhat exist. Or I remember when the annexation on Edison Road out towards my property, when that took place, that was actually the first time that we annexed the entire right of way of Edison all the way out to the airport. Prior to that, only the properties were being annexed. The right of ways weren't being annexed, or if they were right of ways were being annexed, it was annexed to the center of the road. And so you had these jogs and we take care of this side of the street, county takes care of that side of the street. Right. So, again, that's what I mean by identifiable city boundaries. Fortunately, I think we put policies in place and our annexation policies.
I think we've corrected that. So.
In the last, 10 years sometime?
Well, I know it's been corrected. I just know because we've had conversations about that because there was a piece of property on Midvale Road that we brought in and we were that was a big part of the discussion, that make sure that it's all contiguous and that we weren't creating an island. So I know that we have.
And, and I
Made
just
some-
met with a developer that's looking at some property up towards Wooden Road. Wooden's in the county. But they're going to annex up to that location and, they're going to have to go to the county and get permission from the county for that approach on that. And I actually brought up this point was, what is typically the city would annex that portion of Wooden Road that fronts that property, right?
Mhm.
So then all that development, comes under the jurisdiction of the city and it gets the county out of there. But I mean, that's for something to do as we look at that property going forward. Going back to this, an attractive community with an enhanced image, and there you go. That's our entryways. That's how do we want it to look when we come off the freeway as people drive in, is it open space? Is it landscaped, signage, things of this nature? As people travel through, the city, what are they seeing? Interconnected neighborhoods and community resources, an economically diverse and viable community, vibrant downtown that serves as the focal point of the community. And I think, the city has taken a lot of steps and strides towards that with the downtown, new streets and sidewalks. And I think there's another phase of that coming on 6th. So I hate to read everything word for word here, and so I'm going to open it up to the council. If you got any questions or you want to make any comments on anything so far, let's.
Tim, I want to show you something. Just got back from the AWC conference and I went to a couple breakouts. And this tool right here, I really liked. It's called the Eisenhower matrix. So if somebody wants to look that up on their computer, they can. This is what they call their prioritizing, seek clarity, existing, new, do or imminent, can wait.
Mhm.
And what you do is you make a list and then you put it in, is it urgent, high? And then if it's also important, high, that's the do first. And I think that would be a really good tool for us to use.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, that's a good tool. And if you want to, if everyone wants to look at that, it's called the Eisenhower matrix. It's really just a small box.
It's just a priority matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that would be real helpful for us. The man who did the presentation said that you don't take stuff off the list.
It's that.
You don't take stuff off the list, so. So then if a community member says to you, what happened to this, it's still on the list. It just might not have the funding or the priority at the time.
So any questions, comments, thoughts? Again, this is to generate thoughts, generate ideas.
So I have some thoughts. Going back to the community goals, just to have a safe, clean, comfortable, healthy environment. I just believe that, updating and enforcing our SMCs is real important. I've said it all this whole time, if we have an SMC, we need to enforce it first of all. And if it's not enforceable, we need to go back to the drawing book and rewrite it or update it. I really believe if we start there, then everything just kind of, falls into place. With having safe and clean communities, we just need to be holding our residents accountable the same way that, they hold us accountable. So.
Absolutely. And, to that point, again, as you say, update and enforce the SMC, do we have funding for that? Right. Do we have, I think right now we have one code enforcement officer. What will it take to do as the deputy mayor says, to enforce? And enforce is kind of a strong word. Right. It may be, enforcement, update, enforcement, encourage and enforcement. Right. So there's, when you change something, there's always an education piece. Right. So as we change things in our SMC to make this vision come to reality, there's an education piece of it. Right. So, and I think we kind of talked about that too the other night as we talked about the curfew. Right. There's always an education piece before, you start and I hate to use the strong words, enforcing or cracking down or, you know, taking, you know, fines or monetary action against someone because they're not complying, right? That does happen. It's not something that we want to see happen. You know, when you know, in my previous stint here at the city, our code enforcement officer had a really good reputation of working with the public. He had a good reputation of working with the community outreach programs to help folks in need that didn't have the resources to address the issues that were going on in their property, whether it was weed abatement or their fence was falling down or disrepair, just something to bring it up. And so they'd go, he had, a good relationship with church organizations and other non-governmental organizations that could step in and help fill that void, right? And so we need to keep that in our mind as well. You know, how do we engage those non-governmental organizations to help us, you know, with these folks that just may not have the financial means or the physical abilities to take care of their properties anymore. So
speaking to that just a little bit, you know, based on, you know, in a similar vein to what the deputy mayor just brought up, we have done economic studies. So you talked about land use and a vibrant downtown that serves as the focal point. Not so many years ago, we spent a fair amount of money on the Roger Brooks study, and that material is still available. There's no reason to spend money on doing a study like that again. Let's implement the stuff that's already been supplied to us. Roger Brooks, it's still available to speak to us as a consultant and input, and we've got all that material. Let's take the stuff that we have already in place and use it without having to spend another $80,000 or however much it costs to do a study anymore. And then another thing you were talking about, you know, faith-based groups and volunteer organizations to do that kind of stuff. I had an organization reach out to me just about 3 weeks ago because they were doing a seminar here in Sunnyside on how they can serve their community, and we're looking for ideas on how to and what they can do. And I had about an hour and a half conversation on the phone with these guys, and they're looking for ways to engage their church community, not just the one in Sunnyside, but the whole church organization to be able to come to Sunnyside and do these kinds of projects. So those types of organizations are out there, and it's not going to cost the city any funds to do that if we can identify, you know, weed abatement projects or painting projects or something like that where the people in town are already in need, and these people will come in voluntarily and take care of some of these stuff. We have some of these tools already in place, and I want to make sure that we're not going to fund this huge study that we don't have to fund. It's already been done. We're not going to try to do something that's going to cost us a ton of money when we've got volunteers who are willing to come from Spokane or Seattle or Portland or wherever and spend a week here and do these kinds of things. And it's not going to cost us a dime.
Right, and those are great points. You know, and I'm glad you brought that up. Is we shouldn't be here to recreate the wheel, right? Let's take advantage of items and things that the city has already spent money on, right? And you know, those are people look at, you know, talk about wasteful spending. Well, they spent all this money over here and they never did a thing with it, right?
But
And that's discouraging. Go ahead.
I just have a thought on that. You know, one of the things that we have done and just in the last year, 2 years, we've established the Community Economic Development Commission. And that commission is taking into account the Roger Brooks study. And we're working on that. And one of the things that they're doing with that as well is you're working towards creating a new chamber, a business-based chamber of commerce. And so we're working on that, but also the downtown, working with the residents of the businesses downtown and in the outlying business community to also a number of the different things when you talk about beautifying and keeping clean and that sort of thing. So that commission is already working on that project. So I think, you know, we need to have them in part of this conversation as we're looking forward as well. That commission is up and working and healthy. And so we need to, you know, as part of our strategies moving forward, continue to offer them their support that they need. Right now we are, I think there was a community planner, isn't that what it was, Mayor's? That we, you know, we had one and then we lost one or two and for whatever reason, but we do need one of those and to help to continue that project. But it's a community-based, it's community business-based So it's already up and functioning in that direction. So I think that we need to make better use of it, just like we should be making better use of our planning commission. When you talked about identifiable boundaries, I mean, that's a big piece of what they do. So I think that we just need to make sure that one of the things I think we need to do as part of our strategy is go back to each one of our commissions and make sure that they know what their jobs are. And I think that helps us figure out what kinds of things that they're, as community members, they're bringing to the table and they want to see done. I don't know that we ask them enough for those kinds of, I know that whenever I'm talking to any of them, I say that these are your commissions. You tell us, you bring us your ideas, and then we decide if we can do them. And so we just need to remind them of that, I think.
And based on that, if I can,
And it would be a good idea to even invite them to stuff like this, right? Where they could be here
Yeah,
and
and in a
have a
future,
conversation.
right, and I think in a future strategy meeting, I think we ought to do that. At least they're chairs of their different commissions and so forth, because they have ideas.
And even failing that, as council liaison to these commissions and committees, we can bring that
And we
to
can bring
them
that
at their
too. Mm-hmm.
meetings as well. This is what council's talked about, and get them on board and see if they, because they'll start brainstorming, because these are community members. They live here. They have to
And
deal with the consequences of what we do. So their input would be valuable. So
absolutely. So I just think we need to make better use of that already think tank that we have in place. Some of them.
good observations. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Further comments or questions on this? Ms. Bridges?
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good feedback. And you know, and one of my bullet points in here in a later document actually talks about it is more focused on the planning commission, but you know, helping those folks understand what their role is, and their roles should be defined by the policies that are developed and the goals that are developed by the city, right? Instead of going off half-cocked and doing things that may not be beneficial, you know, but if you bring them into these meetings, they can see the process, they can be involved in the process. And so when they go out to do their jobs and look at economic issues or planning issues or other partnerships that are out there, that they're focused, that they know the direction the city wants to go. So, you know, then we go down and we get into financial health. Again, that's always the key, the financial health of the city. We should never lose track of the financial health of the city. And because that, you know, again, that helps us provide those basic services. And once we get into really good financial health, then we can start moving forward to other things that are important to the community that go beyond those basic needs. Then we get into transportation. You know, that's pretty straightforward. Safe streets, regional improvements that help transportation. You know, when you talk about regional improvements, so back in 2005, city manager at the time, he was driving down the freeway and he says, well, how come the freeway signs never say so many miles to Sunnyside? It'll say so many miles to Richland, so many miles to Prosser, but it doesn't say anything about Sunnyside. And so, you know, we kind of went to the WashDOT and said, how come these exits just get skipped over? Right. And so, I mean, there's just little things, right? We're here, we're on the map. We're the largest community in the valley. You know, we have a vibrant economic center. So people don't know about it. They just drive right past it on the freeway. And those are just small things, right? Let's make sure that we're out there. People can see us. You know, then we get into public safety, obviously. You know, people want to feel safe in their homes. They want to be able to you know, live a normal, healthy life. They want good outcomes for themselves, for their children, for their other family members. And we get into community services. Now, this is kind of you know, this one's kind of difficult. It's been difficult since I can remember. I started the city in 2003. And it's always been ups and downs, and mostly downs. How do we provide the community services, you know, and for the recreation? You know, and the big piece of that is the community center and the swimming pool. And we've seen that in the budget this year. Again, the swimming pool, the community center, those things have always been around. And those are important. Those are quality of life issues, and quality of life, let's let that define, be part of the definition of the city of Sunnyside is what kind of quality of life can we offer to folks?
And unfortunately, every time our budget gets tight, those are the first things that everybody wants to cut.
Absolutely. And that's typically because community recreational activities are 100% funded by the general fund. And that seems to always get lost, right? Because the other priorities take over, whether it's fire and safety, whether it's, streets. Those are the big three that come out of that. And, the stepchild is, recreation activities. And that's the first thing that gets cut. Again, that's not just today. Again, I've been here since 2003. It's been that way. And I was talking to the deputy mayor earlier this week about the community center. I don't know if any of you folks remember how that got started. So the city got a block grant to build this building. It was a great idea. They had a local organization coming alongside, said, "Hey, we'll run it for you. We'll operate it for you. We'll put on the recreation programs for you." The city, took the grant, built a beautiful center down there, perfect location for it. Checks all the boxes. And then the provider, the people that stepped forward, they went in on a weekend and cleaned out. I mean, I don't think they lasted 3 months. And it's been shut down pretty much every day since 2005, I think, when it was complete. We just cannot keep, that center open. We need to find, some partnership and develop a partnership that can come alongside of us and say, can you operate this for us? Right. Or here's some funding for you. I mean, we can't expect them to do it all, but the city needs to find that partner, whether it's a boys and girls club, whether it's another, non-government organization that puts on, or can take advantage of that. And not just 1 or 2 weekends a year. There's 52 weeks in a year. So, it's probably the biggest underutilized asset the city has is that community center.
And it's already too small for the kinds of things that we need to use it for.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Jim, that was one of my priorities that I sent to you was, there is a desire and there's a need. And I think our opportunity, we went up and toured the Boys and Girls Club in Prosser. And what they're doing in that community is amazing. And I think that needs to be a priority for us to find out what it's going to take. We did this once before, and I don't know why we didn't follow up on it. But I think that's a real opportunity for council and to bring the community into this, because it's going to take all of the community to do it. It's going to take some donations. It's going to take commitments from the community. And I just think this is one thing that we really need to work towards is getting that community center open again. And, the Boys and Girls Club, you see the ads on TV from Prosser, 88% of their youth aren't drinking alcohol or other things. And it really has an impact on the youth. It has an impact throughout the community for, gang violence, for kids that are getting into mischief, all that kind of stuff. They have somewhere to go and something to do, and it's focused around after school hours, as opposed to we were open during the day but closed after school. So I just think that we really need to pursue that as a community. That's one of my top priorities.
The other thing is, just this past week, the Boys and Girls Club were in Sunnyside, doing some recruiting, doing some working with kids. So we already have some of that step started. We just need to, like you said, follow through. And I think that could be one of those partnerships, as well as the one that we were talking about with the church organization. All of these different groups, it doesn't have to just be one partner. We could have many partners.
Well, it has to be run under one
Umbrella.
Somebody's got to be the point and maybe coordinate volunteers or coordinate different groups, but somebody's got to come in and there's got to be a model. And I think Boys and Girls Club, that's an organization that we've been talking to probably since about November. And so we can definitely look into that. They seem to be doing quite a good job in Prosser. And maybe look into that, see how they can benefit us. One of the things I've noticed over the years is just because it really works good in a different community, it doesn't always necessarily translate immediately into Sunnyside, but we can definitely try to adapt something. But that's huge because our recreational activities are definitely a quality of life question. And if we can get them to be maybe not standalone, but a little more standalone and not such an impact on our city budget, on our general fund, then they're not going to be the first thing on the chopping block every single time there's an economic downturn.
But I know that, you know, when we met with the Girls and Boys Club, Boys and Girls Club, I always say it backwards. Earlier this year, they were very excited about, you know, because a lot of times the roadblock to bringing in something like that is you don't have the building. And so they're very excited because we do have a building that they can utilize day one. And it might not be big enough long-term, but for short term, it is a definite jewel that will bring a Boys and Girls Club into Sunnyside. So I just think we really need to focus. I don't think there's been enough focus. You know, a committee that really pursues it, that goes out to the community, talks to the community, gets sponsors. So I think there's a lot of sponsors out there that would be more than happy to participate in that, because I think that would be a passion for the community.
No, and I completely agree. And you know, it's that developing that sponsorship, right? You know, so when we get the boys, you know, if they do come in, and because they do need funding, so there's the city's going to have to come alongside them. Obviously, I think for lack of a better term, to, you know, provide that seed as we work towards getting those sponsorships for whoever it may be that comes in, because it is we all know it is not cheap to operate that facility, to staff that facility, to provide. You know, one of the things that I saw in the Boys and Girls Club when I was the county engineer in Asotin County was they had daily trip activities going out of their facility. They had a beautiful facility. At the same time, you could sign your child up to on Tuesday, they were going to the swimming pool, the aquatic center. On Wednesday, they were taking the kids to the movie theater, right? You know, whatever it is. But a lot of that money was all community donations to that facility. They absolutely worship. That was Lewiston and Clarkston absolutely threw money at that place hand over fist, because it did such a great job with the youth. And so, you know, we need to look at the same thing. How do we get the community involved, right? It's not just, you know, well, we're going to raise your taxes so we can make money to run this thing, right? Anyway, but again, that's always been a big bugaboo for quality of life, is our recreation programs around here. I mean, we struggle to get the pool open this year, right?
And if I can, speaking about the pool, I mean, this is just a short term this year, right? So I think we need to start coming up with ideas or planning for what we're gonna do for next year as well. You know, maybe during the budget season. There's a few ideas that we discussed, you know, when we did have to raise the taxes for our community, but it's just a short term. So let's,
You know, and there were some real creative ideas that came out of from the community, like the Daybreak Rotary deciding to come up with a bunch of money to help us get the pool open with some equipment and so forth. So, you know, there are a lot of creative things going on out there that we can pipe into.
Yep.
But they just need to know that we need them.
You're right. Absolutely.
And sometimes we don't sell that portion of the project as well as maybe we should.
Well, I'm going to kind of skip through these other ones. We get down to the community participation, and you see the little triangle that I have there. And I think that's important. You know, you get customers, right? I talked about this at the city council meeting briefly. You know, we have customers. You know, we're in the business of providing information. You know, but we have customers, we have service levels, we have feedback, and it just keeps going around and around. And you know, we can't ignore it. As that feedback comes through, then we adjust and we adapt, and we, you know, to meet the continuing needs of the customers. And then those, you know, again, It's not a circle, it's a triangle. But as you see that's the way it works. Strategic plan, community vision statement, goals and objectives, action strategies, program missions and statements, annual work plans, budget, performance outcomes, measurement and reporting. And it's just a continuous, process improvement go through. That kind of leads us over into, our, what action ideas that we may have. And you see in the dark bold, those were my ideas, as we look at this. And we just talked about the community center, right? Develop a comprehensive recreational social center around the community center. And then, this was from the past. Do we allow alcohol in there? Because we've had people that want to have their family parties and things of this nature, allowing alcohol sales. And that
We have talked about that, and that is something that is now a possibility. There are some requirements in place to make that happen, but they're doable. And so we did have that discussion. And so those steps have been taken. Also, with the community center, I remember when Councilor Hart was mayor, one of the first things that she got involved in was setting money aside from the LTAC to add on, build on, maybe develop a convention center or something like that, thinking long term. And I don't know where we are on those funds, but that was an idea that council also approved, that a certain percentage of our LTAC funds would be set aside for that purpose.
And I think there should be, I'm not sure we talked about doing, well, you're on that.
You have to be careful where and how to, you spend the LTAC funds.
Well, exactly, because the whole idea is bringing heads to beds.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea.
And that was
And
the
the
purpose
whole,
of the
and that was the
convention
whole
center idea.
purpose of the convention idea. And so if we, and I remember that Mr. DeLay, who's with, he's one of the bigger,
Denley? Oh, Tom.
Denley, yeah, Mr. Denley. He is one of the bigger guys who pay into the LTACs, heads and beds, and he's a big guy on that. And the whole idea about having it, putting that money aside, and we were putting in, I think it was like 25,000 a year. So I'm not sure what that should be now.
What if you remember, we changed it to where it's not restricted for a convention center anymore because it was an unrealistic goal.
But it isn't an unrealistic goal. And,
Well, the committee decided it was an unrealistic goal.
We're still looking long-term. We're not talking about tomorrow. We're not talking about 10 years from now.
Right.
I mean, I'd love it to be.
And that was council approved,
And that
so.
was council approved, and I don't remember it being changed, but it may have been. But nevertheless, that kind of money is the kind of money that you could use at the community center to bring trade shows in. You could bring it in to have more, I think if you make that more of a convention center where you bring in trade shows, you bring in car shows, you bring in all these things, the hotels and motels will start to build on this side of town. And that's what we want to see happen. Because they're, again, heads and beds. So I think it wasn't a pipe dream. I think I still think it's a good plan to put a little bit of that money. I know some of that money is now being used for marketing of the community. That was one of the things the city, the LTAC approved this last year, was some money to set aside for marketing of the community, which is another way to bring heads to beds, is let people know what we got here. So I think, you really got to think in terms of how to use those LTAC monies. I mean, it's good for tourist related activities like it's already doing. But you also got to think in the long term, how can we build up some money? And that's a place where we could build some money to make the convention center or the community center even more attractive, not only to our community, but to surrounding communities. There's not a convention center between Yakima and Tri-Cities, and Kennewick's is not big enough for very much. The one at the Hapo Center is okay. The Richland one is too small. The Yakima's is plenty big, but there's a real opportunity for us here.
Well, on that same topic, as one who travels a fair bit, I find myself in small towns in different parts of the country, and there's these little podunk towns in the middle of western South Dakota that'll have a Holiday Inn right next door to the most beautiful convention center facility. It's like, I mean, I can only dream of something like that in Sunnyside. Where on earth are they getting the funding for this? Because their population is about 8,000. there's no way the population in that community, I mean, Western South Dakota, ag is not a big moneymaker for them. It's pretty dry and barren. Where are they getting the funding from this? Is it the state? Is it federal? How are they getting that? And how can we tap into some of that? I know we're not South Dakota, but what I'm saying, if there's resources for them, there's got to be resources for us. Why have we not investigated in some of these areas a little bit more?
Okay, look at what Jackie has up on the screen.
This is just the resolution that
Mhm.
didn't limit it to the convention center
Mhm.
council.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and that's what LTAC came up with. And Mr. Denley alongside that, realized that the motels probably need to come before the convention center because we couldn't have a convention here at this point with the number of motel rooms we have. And also that LTAC isn't just about heads and beds. It is a matrix, it is a measurement, but it isn't just about heads and beds. And
Again, that's what he always.
well, Mr. Denley's one of a committee. And, but the LTAC committee, worked very hard on this.
No,
And
I see the benefit.
Julia,
Yeah, what? What?
point of order, I was speaking.
And I was agreeing with you.
Okay, let's focus on the point. What were you saying, Teresa?
Never mind, move on.
But, and again, if you look at in my bold there, the very last thing is dollar signs, right? It's bringing money into the city, other sources of funds that,
Mhm.
that we're missing out on. And then it ties right into, tourist activities. Tourist activities, again, I think a part of that is portraying a positive community identity, right? Again, these are action items that I just wrote down. Train our youth to be more involved in city government. Outreach. Are we working with our schools to get them involved in government, understand civics, understand what it means to be to work for the city and provide services to the community. And it might not necessarily result in a government job or a government program, but it might help the youth understand community involvement and what that means and how that can be rewarding in its own right.
And if I could say something along those, that topic, the school district does hold job fairs and there's different organizations, employers that go into and, they pile up into the cafeteria. I think I've seen this last time I did see the city of Sunnyside start to participate in those, which is an awesome idea. Even though we're not probably going to attract the right out of the high school employees, right? But it gives them an idea. Okay, maybe I want to work for the city. Maybe I want to do public works. Maybe I want to do finance or whatever. So it gives them that idea, and
Well, and here's the thought. Let's think about adding to that. What about council members attending a job fair?
yeah, that's
I think
You're not necessarily going to get somebody right out of high school who wants to run for city council, but to get them thinking about it. And we've already got in place or in process this youth council that I think is an absolutely phenomenal idea.
we should.
And I think we need to do some work on that. That's not going to be a huge outlay of cash. And I think the benefits long-term to the community, I don't know that we're even going to be able to measure because they're going to be so huge. Other communities, when I've talked to other mayors around the county, they are looking forward to us getting that in place so that they can take a look at it and maybe copy it because they're pretty excited about the prospect. So there's an opportunity to get our youth involved as well.
Oh, I agree. And then, we got to remember our youth are our workforce of the future, right? So, and as the deputy mayor said, working for the city, get them involved. So, as a member of the American Public Works Association, as a professional engineer, as someone that's been a city engineer, county engineer, public works director, the APWA always had an APWA week. The city used to do here building week, right, to recognize the impacts of building and for the contractors and those type of things. So APWA it focuses on the youth to try to get them involved in, hey, these are viable jobs. These are good paying jobs. You know, they mean something to somebody. They mean something to the community you go into. You know, they're not just, brainless government projects. You know, as technology evolves, that all that comes into play with our infrastructure, right? We're maintaining our water and sewer systems. You know, how much of that is all computer operated now. And, and kids today, it's rare to see them not having a phone in their hand or being in front of a computer or gaming or something. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised. You walk into a modern facility, a wastewater treatment plant or a water facility, and it's just be wall to wall screens. It's, you've got the system all mapped out, and you can, whenever I touch this button here, I can turn this pump on. So those are the type of minds that we need to develop. And there, obviously, it does involve some hands-on manual labor work. But again, that's how APWA approaches the youth, right? It gets them involved. So as we go through this some more, and we talked about this incentive program for people to help maintain their property, right? And we talked about that earlier, right? What's that involved? We talked about the non-governmental organizations, the churches, the other groups that are out there. Again, working with them to say, yeah, we will accept your help. It dawned on me as we talked about that earlier. Anytime you're fixing up something, there's a potential for it to cost money, right? Labor costs money. It costs money for fuel to get the vehicles there and do this and that thing. Well, the previous code enforcement officer, he actually would go to the Yakima County landfill, and they have the hazardous household waste disposal area, right? And you can get paint there for free. Now, it might not be the color of paint that you want to paint your fence, but for someone that's in need, that's free. You just go to the county and you say, hey, we've got a community project. Can we take your paint? Right. And then, of course, you got to make sure you dispose of the materials properly when you're done with it. But that's a resource that's out there that we can always look to help these folks maintain their properties if it's a painting issue. Then, of course, you take care of our seniors. Right. I think does the city still operate the senior center?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it doing an effective job? Is it meeting their needs? Is there something else that we're not doing to meet their needs?
There's always room.
But
there's always
But
room.
they are quite active over there. The Meals on Wheels as their Monday through Friday, I believe. And there are other functions that go on there. And it's done relatively inexpensively. I think it's one of our most efficient centers things we do is the community center, and it's well used. I mean, the senior center, it's well used, really is.
One of the things too is, and that's true, what Ms. Hancock said, is that the other thing is, though, we have put on the account on the budget several years in a row now to have the exterior of that building, a new roof on it. It needs to be painted. It needs new siding. There's still a leak that we haven't figured out where it's at. And then we've had people on the roof looking, but I think with the new roof situation, we get rid of that leak. But even when we had the ARPA monies, that was one of the things that we'd set aside some money that we could spend on painting and redoing the exterior, because it looks sorry from the outside.
Right.
I mean, it's really well kept inside. We got new floors, we have the bathrooms fixed up, we have all the rooms and everything that we need in there. But the exterior is starting to look pretty sorry.
No, and you're right. And one of my big issues, how long it took us to get that ramp
Oh,
in place.
that was ridiculous. And it's not even.
Seems like every time we want to do some sort of an upgrade to it or an improvement or maintenance, whatever, it is like getting your fingernails pulled.
Mhm.
It's just difficult to get it done. And it seems like something like that ramp should have been real simple. And I think somebody just stepped up and put in an approved ramp. I mean, we couldn't have the city guys do it for whatever reason. It had to be approved and
Is that and the other thing?
whatever the rules were on that one. But we finally got it done. It took a long time. And we're running into that kind of issue. I don't know if it's somebody just dragging their feet because they don't feel like putting the work in to get it done, or if it's because really these rules are have our hands so tied we can't really do anything. But to be able to get that building maintained and get it freshened up, I don't think it'd be that big of a deal. A couple of coats of paint and probably do wonders to that thing.
Definitely.
You said there's some ARPA funds that were available. or that were
Well,
budgeted.
you know, and I don't know where those went. I think we ended up absorbing them someplace else. But it was one of the goals that we had when we were looking at the ARPA monies. You know, the thing with the museum, the thing with, you know, some different staffing that we were needing, restrooms, yeah, and things like that at some of the parks and landscaping at different places around to make it more, our city properties more attractive. So, but and the senior center was one of those, was on that list.
If that was our goal, what happened to that goal? I mean,
To that goal is that it got, as usual, that was like Parks and Recs. It just got cut off at the knees and
The ARPA
Well-
last fall were all
I
reallocated.
wasn't done.
Go ahead, Teresa.
I don't know what was the
If
question there.
if the elected officials are not ready to put the work in that is needed for strategic planning, it is a waste of time. If we don't follow up on it as elected officials and watch this and make sure that our priorities are the priorities of the city manager, of the city staff, then these things fall through the cracks. And I think that's why we're here today, is because we need, as elected officials, to put in the work to make sure these things happen.
And that, Counselor Hancock, is all well and good, but every once in a while, as in the case of last year, we had a bit of a budget crisis. If you'll recall, we suddenly realized that we had not been getting accurate reports and found out our financial situation was in much worse shape than we had anticipated. And we had to do some reallocation in order to make sure that everything was covered. So the priorities were set by council. However, a certain reality changed and required us to take a different approach. And those funds were reallocated for that reason, to keep the city solvent.
But that is still on council because council did not follow through on it. And, you know, you can say that there was a budget crisis, but that still reflects back on council. And that's why I think as we're talking about this today, we need to be a better tuned in on what we're asking staff to do, and then have expectations and goals and see that this happens, because we can throw out all these ideas about painting the community center and putting a new roof on it. But until we have strategic goals, and that's what we're supposed to be doing here today, then we're just kind of spinning our wheels, because then it doesn't happen and we don't follow through on it. We need a matrix, we need goals, and we need deliverables.
I'm sure you're right. So carry on, sir.
So we have to improve our image of our town, you know, and we talked about this, you know, marketing. How do we show our community pride and present a positive appearance, you know, in the worst of times? And I mean, does it get much worse than what we're in right now? Right. And, you know, again, this was in 2009. So I had to actually work through 5 different manager changes. So how do we break that cycle? Right. And that's not necessarily a budgetary item, but it does. We've seen all the news reports. It's out there. Wow, that's Sunnyside again. Right. We need to figure out how to break that cycle, and show that we are a vibrant community. We do have pride in our community. Yes, we do have issues like everybody else, but you know, ours always seem to kind of rise to the top, and you know, people say, well, that's Sunnyside. And as we get down here further, you know, we get into that, right? It's called apathy, right? Everybody's, yeah, you know, it's Sunnyside. Well, we need to break that, because I live in this community. We all live in this community. You know, and I've always been proud of this community. But we need to get that message out, and we need to develop good messaging that, yeah, we are open for business. We are a safe, vibrant community. We do have things to offer to people that want to move here and raise their families here.
Can I just say along that same line, and it kind of applies to Ms. Hancock as well. The strategic plan is a roadmap for the future. It's not just tomorrow. It is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And we have some things that are immediate, absolutely. But we have some things that we need to be looking at down the road. I mean, like perhaps with the convention center and some other things that we're looking at using LTAC money for, or because that's money we can get, you know, and then, you know, but we got to look down 20 years too. I mean, we're so far behind, and this is just, it's an apathy thing. I believe that it's an apathy thing from, say, when you first came in 2000, what'd you say, 3? All of those years since, there's been marginal marginal, just dragging our feet trying to improve this community. It's been really difficult. It's always been poor me, poor me, poor me. We have money. Just need to use it properly. And that's part of what this strategic roadmap is all about, in my opinion.
And if I could say something before Mr. Bridges, yeah, I can agree with Councillor Hart, but Councillor Hancock also has a point in where we need to be able to create these long-term goals, but also be, okay, what is something realistic long-term, right? The water treatment plant, water supply, the wells, stuff like that, that no matter who is in these seats, who is in those seats, it's always going to be something that we need to address. But more short-term goals also is because, next year it could be totally different council up here. Could be totally different staff. So all those goals and ideas that we worked hard, to put in a plan vanish. Nobody cares about them no more. Nobody thinks it's a priority. So we need to be able to separate these long-term goals and these shorter-term goals with the current council and current staff. So it's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. And some of that goes to, as the mayor said, do we spend money on a study, right?
You don't have to do that.
A study that was done years ago.
Mhm.
It's not being implemented,
Mhm.
right? And so as future councils come on, they need to be aware of the histories of studies or items that have been taking place. And just because, one council can't bind the next council to something else, but have them be aware of it. It's that historic perspective, what was done. So we're not spending monies over and over and over again. And then the next council comes in and says, well, we need to do this. And well, let's just reach back here on the shelf and document
Well,
on it.
dust it off and
Blow the dust off of it and say, yeah. And so we need to be mindful of that going forward. And as, as election nears, or as the election happens, we bring in those folks that are running for council seats, to these meetings, right? They should always be involved in the budget process, right? So they're aware of the budget when they get on. So it's not, hey, how come we're not doing this? Well, that's not budgeted, right? And because they come in with ideas and, that's the question. Well, how come we're not doing this? How come we're not doing that? Well, it wasn't budgeted. This is the budget discussion. And so if they're not invited in that process, they ask those questions. When they are invited in that process, they're aware of, hey, okay, they might
Teach
not.
them things.
Right. They don't get to make the decision there because it's a council decision to adopt and approve the budget, but they're aware of what's in the budget when they show up, right?
And I think that's an excellent idea. Also, the knowledge of what's been done, the studies, that kind of stuff can be part of, I think some of the incoming council members this last time around wanted to update our onboarding process, which that was a term that I had never heard before. Orientation, I guess, is what we called it when I was learning stuff. But part of that process where they get brought up to speed is, okay, we've got these studies in place that we're trying to implement and they've been slow for whatever reason because, things get in the way of things. But whatever, understand that this is here and this is what we're working on and this is what we paid for. Because we do tend to lose a lot of institutional knowledge with staff turnover or council member turnover. We can have a council member who serves for 20 years, but as soon as that council member is not there anymore, that knowledge and that experience is gone. And so if we can do something to bring in incoming council members up to speed, like you were saying, I think that's absolutely vital.
Well, and that institutional knowledge, that's probably the biggest shock for me coming back and sitting in this seat for the last 3 weeks is there's nobody in the city that really has that institutional knowledge anymore. There's 4 people that still work here that I was a public works director. They know, the history or they know where things are in the ground. A good example was with HLA. We had a meeting with those folks and the deputy public works director and they had a project and apparently, we're using irrigation or we're using city water to water the park. Of course that has a cost to it, right? We charge ourselves the same we charge anybody else. It goes to the meter, we get charged for it. So they said, well, we want to try to figure out how to take advantage of the irrigation water that's on site. But there's not enough flow, or they need some storage or something to pump into some storage and then, distribute it out through the park sprinkler system. And I said, well, when we built the community center, we've got 10,000 gallon underground storage tank right there. That splash park that no one ever uses anymore. That splash park was designed for the water that ran through that splash park to drain and goes into an underground storage tank. And that underground storage tank fed the irrigation system. And nobody knew that, right? HLA didn't know it. Obviously, the new deputy public works director didn't know it. So, now getting us off of city water, which is impacting what we call our equivalent residential units, our ERUs. That's how many more houses we can pick up. And it's somewhere like, it's almost 200 houses. That's how much water that place uses, is almost 200 houses per year. We can shift that over to 200 new houses and we can use the available irrigation water. So that just reduced the cost of that project. It makes it seem a little more viable. Hey, we can take advantage of this. Yeah, there's going to be some work done to it because that tank was just essentially buried and all the controls were buried to it. Well, you got to dig it up and you got to put a new control system in it and then
Sure.
connect into it. But that's institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
It is severely lacking. So, we get into how do we retain staff? How do we get staff to buy into our community, right? So that they take ownership and pride of their work and work with the new folks that are coming up underneath them. So as they get, age in 5, 10, 15 years in their career, that they're training those folks. And this was again, a big thing that was, the APWA had developed, in the mid 2000s, was the aging workforce of the baby boomers. And how do you retain that institutional knowledge or pass that institutional knowledge down? And it's not just public works, it's in the city itself, right? In our other governmental functions that we do. It's always, we should be able to, figure out how to pass that knowledge on and so folks are aware of what's going on. But anyway, so
It's a big deal.
yeah, it is. So then we get into, replacing aging infrastructure and water and sewer systems, and we're facing that right now. When we built the treatment plant, right, there was a lot of talk in those days of privatizing water and sewer and ambulance as well. And one of the things, and when I was in those meetings and I went to all those facilities across the state and across Oregon that were privatized, right? The thing that came out of that wasn't necessarily presented to council at the time to buy into privatization was when you hire a private firm to run your facility, they will always present you, here's our budget to operate this facility today. But here's the budget that you're going to pay us to put in the bank. So in 20 years goes down the road, we can replace this facility. No one ever wanted to focus on that piece, right? They just wanted to focus on how much money we're going to save on a day-to-day cost. But those privatized companies will not take over any facility if you're not willing to put money in the bank to replace that facility or to replace aging infrastructure. But that's where we are today again. And we were there in 2003, 2005, whenever it is. It's every city, every county, every government in the United States does not fund long-term infrastructure replacement and repair. And we'll deal with it when it comes up. We kick the can down the road, whether it's a street, whether it's, a building, whether it's, water and sewer. They just kick the can down the road and let the next council deal with it. Well, it's here we are. We opened that facility in 2007. Here we are 18 years into it and it needs help, right? Where's the money going to come from, right? There was never a plan to put money away. And so that's a big part of the budget. That's going to affect your utility rates. It's going to affect your, potential for growth. When somebody comes knocking on your door, hey, we want to build a big bottling plant down here. Do you got water for us? Right. And so, it's not necessarily one of those things you see when we talk about, the image of the city or those, but it's what the developers see. And the developers are ones that bring in the money. So we have to be able to invest and get our infrastructure in place.
If I can, Ms. Bridges, I mean, I believe we need to be more proactive than reactive, right? I mean, we need to think about these now, instead of, a big company coming to us and we don't have water or we don't have this, how many jobs are we losing at that point, right? So, yeah, we really need to focus and see, going forward with the budget and okay, let's put a little bit aside and, you know, maybe into the bonds or whatever, and they start, you know, making more money there. But we do need to be more proactive in what we do as a city.
You know, and, you know, with that thought, you know, even when we punched the water and sewer out to the Monson property, you know, my thought at the time as the Public Works Director is we would go to the Public Works Trust Fund and we would get, you know, low interest loan. We do qualify for those low interest loans. They're long-term. But for whatever reason, the city manager at the time, he went with the bond, which has a higher percentage interest rate, you know? So we need to be mindful of when we, you know, looking for those opportunities, what to take advantage of. Now, the Public Works Trust Fund has come back. There was a few years where it went away because there was a good funding source for it. But, you know, even then, I actually promoted, you know, because we had to pay these bonds back, right? We didn't have the utility rate, or we didn't want, you know, was the city willing to raise the utility rate to pay that new bond cost? That was, you know, almost $3 million to put water and sewer out there and attach the new wells. Well, that's got to come from somewhere. You're going to put it on the backs of the folks that already got good water and good sewer in front of their house. Why do I got to pay for somebody that's out there, right? That's long-term. I mean, they got to pay their share, but typically what you see cities doing, or as communities grow, they, you know, for better or for worse, they put in special utility rates to cover new areas, right? Because those costs are so much greater now, right? You look at the cost that we pay today versus the cost that we could have done 20 years ago, right? You know, it's inflation. Everything goes up on an annual basis, construction materials, all that. So, you know, that's one thing that you can look at as they go out there, right? Well, there's, you know, special utility rates. Now, how's that going to affect a future developer, right? So you've got that balancing act that you got to figure out, right? Well, yeah, my cost per lot out there is, you know, developed lot is 35,000 by the time I put the roads and infrastructure in. But now you're saying there's this, you know, instead of a $75 monthly water bill, because I'm out here, I have my people are going to buy my house, I have to sell it to them. Hey, your water bill is going to be $125, right? So there's that balancing act you got to figure out with those special rate districts. But that is a financing tool as the city grows, just to let you know that those things happen. You know, if the city chooses to do that, you know, again, what's the balancing act? You know, we're working with, I found out that, you know, there's a potential for the city to get $2.1 million out of the federal government as a direct appropriation for the new water well they want to put in down off of Alexander. You know, that's you know, just about half of what it's going to take. But that opens up that area down there for future development. We just seen the port, you know, put another new road down there and support businesses down there. But along with that, you know, you've got to have new water reservoirs. You know, well 6 and 7 are going bad. You know, we're trying to fix that. That's going to take, you know, $1 million or so to rehab that. The treatment plant is, you know, having its failures right now too. So that's going to take several $1 million to upgrade. So as, you know, as we look forward, as we move forward towards the budget, those are the things that we need to keep in mind, right? What are our current utility rates? What are our current utility taxes? You know, what are our long-term impacts? What are, you know, to local residents as well as to the growth areas?
So, you know, since 2013, these topics have come up every single budget discussion, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's replacing police vehicles or fire vehicles or replacing this, that, or the other thing. We've got to have some reserve funds. We got to put some money away. We got to put some money away. Every single year it comes up. However, we haven't done it. So it's one thing to talk about it, and council has always expressed concern. Whoever's been the manager at the time has said, this is important. We need to do this. And then it doesn't happen. And it can be a whole variety of reasons. Revenues are down, so we have to take money out of there to cover all of our costs, or it didn't get approved in the budget for whatever reason. You know, if this is something that's important to us, it has to appear in the budget and it has to be approved. And we also have to realize that it's going to involve increased costs for the people in the community, and they're not going to like it. And we better be able to explain it clearly why we feel we need to do this, because nobody is going to understand, well, our wastewater treatment plant it needs some work. You know, as long as they can flush the toilet and it goes away, they're not worried about it. So we need to be able to articulate clearly why we need to increase these costs. You know, we didn't get a lot of negative feedback from the increased utility tax to cover the pool. People understood. We go down there, there's the pool, it's open, and this is the reason it's open, because we're all pitching in and paying a little bit more. They get that, but they never see, you know, utility infrastructure. They just don't see it. So we've got to be really good about that, and we've got to be committed to actually doing it. Because the conversation is great. This conversation is very helpful. I think we all agree that it's important, but if we don't do anything with it, then we're wasting time on it.
Absolutely.
What I would like to see also during the budget is, you know, we're doing some fixes to the treatment plant, right? I would like to get a better understanding, okay, you know, once these fixes are done, you know, this is what the treatment plant needs in the next 5 years. This is what's going to need in the next 10 years, and so on and so on, so we could plan a little bit better.
No, that's important.
And that should be, that should be identified in your long-range sewer plan, as well as your long-range water plans. You know, the state and the federal government's mandate that we update those, you know, just like our growth, our comprehensive plan, you know, that's mandated to be updated, right? And it's not just something you put on the shelf, right? Because when you go and apply for a grant or a loan, you have to pull those documents and say, yes, this was part of that plan, right?
That was wasn't that how we got some of the money here recently for some of the well money, is that we were able to pull that up and use that. And Cuz was here,
Right.
that was one of the plans that he used so that we could get money to make some of those repairs.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, that's a very, you know, reviewing these long-term plans, just like we do the TIP every, you know, the
Every year.
6-year plan, we do that every year. We need to do these every year too.
Yep.
And it needs to be on some sort of quarterly basis. Okay, we're going to look at this, we're going to look at that. But that has to be part of our strategy. It has to be part of our work plan.
Yep.
And so that we know that that's what, you know, that's going on, because it's all part and parcel. It seems only like 1 year, maybe 2 years, we were able to put away a reserve. Some money, I can't remember exactly how much it was, but I want to say 123,000.
We'll put some away.
Yeah, and it was only one time since I've been on council, since, you know, what was that, 16? 18, 19, we were able to put some money away into reserves. I don't know that we've been able to do that since. But we need to have that, because you can't go into the new year without some sort of reserve. It's not just a beginning balance. And we need to be more conscious of how we do that.
No,
That long range plan is a big piece of that.
and you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. So then we, you know, we get into, our stormwater plans and our stormwater fees, and, you know, how that impact, you know, now we started getting into impacts. How does this impact the community, right? I mean, I worked for a city manager that said, hey, you know, you got a bare piece of property out here. We're going to raise your cost on that bare piece of property to pay your stormwater fee. And his whole thought process was, that'll increase the holding costs on that property, so the person is more likely to sell it and generate income and revenue and get a developer in there. Well, I mean, that was just totally, you know, backwards. Basically, it caused everybody's head to explode, and it was a big mess, right? I mean, that's just not the way they need our fees, whatever they are, need to fit the situation, and are appropriate, and are fair, and are sustainable, you know, or something that the public can handle. What we do, we need to look at, you know, on the, you know, incrementally, not just here, boom, everybody's going to pay some massive increased cost, right?
And we did have a proposal in that last year, where for this type of property, there's this rate, for this type of property, there's that rate. And, you know, we had that conversation last year, and so trying to make it more fair for people. The end result was, for the average residential user, it was going to be a lower rate. For industrial users, it was going to be a higher rate, because I got a lot of outcry from churches. The church doesn't usually have a big budget, but they do have a big parking lot. And because of that, they're considered a business, and they were going to pay a higher runoff or stormwater fees. And they were just absolutely furious. And for whatever reason, they all felt the need to reach out to me personally. And especially my church, because it's got a couple of acres of parking lot, and they were just going ballistic on me. So I know that we did some conversation on that last year, and yeah, people are paying attention to that sort of thing. But
I mean, go ahead.
it fell through. It hasn't happened.
Mhm.
But,
Right, it hasn't gone anywhere now.
no,
But, you know, and I think,
Maybe we need
again,
to
back
bring it
in
back.
my time, you know, I actually was pushing for, credit, right? So as you develop some folks come in and say, hey, we're going to do this in your parking lot. Well, you know, the law says you cannot allow your stormwater to be released out into the city street, right?
Mhm.
So then everybody's like, well, then how can we got to pay this fee?
Mhm.
So they do put in their own systems, right? That are designed to handle a certain amount. When they do get more than a certain amount, it does come out in the city, and that's all fine and dandy at that point in time is legal because they've done their basic, but they should get some type of credit for that. And so, you know, again, as you develop a rate structure, those are the things that need to actually, you know, be looked at. You know, what type of, you know, how much did it cost for them? And then they're not cheap. Believe me, I'm in the business. They're not cheap to install these underground systems that take stormwater away.
Well, no, and I know that for a development like a church anymore, they do have to have like a retaining pond or something like that to keep that stormwater in place.
So they should get some credit back.
They should.
Absolutely. So, you know, the street plan, a sidewalk plan, you know, right now, the city has the transportation benefit district, right? And you're raising funds through, what is it, license plates fee?
No, sales tax.
Sales-
Oh, sales tax. Okay. So you're raising money through your sales tax. I was surprised we're not doing chip sealing anymore around here. You know, we used to have,
We got behind in 2020 because of availability of some of the materials, and we have never been able to catch up. And this year it was because of the budget issues from last year that they decided to forego a lot of that. But up until 2020, we were doing, I don't know how many miles of chip sealing every year.
and we need to get back to that.
Yes, we do, because I remember when I was on council that one of the city managers decided we weren't going to do chip sealing. And what that puts us,
Because we had the best streets in the valley.
Yeah.
Didn't need to do any maintenance on them.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and because of that, our streets will fail. If you don't keep up with that chip sealing, I don't care how dire the budget gets, you have to keep up with that chip sealing or our streets will fail, and replacing the streets are going to be a lot more expensive than the chip sealing. So chip sealing is always the first thing that goes with budgets. Everybody says, okay, go away with the chip sealing. That's the wrong approach. And that's what this strategic planning is about. We need to understand we don't have the budget. We don't have the budget. Back to that matrix, what are our absolute priorities? What do we need to do to maintain the city and not lose ground? So, you know, that's my issue with, you know, I've been through a few bad advices. The stormwater was one. You know, I had people coming in my store saying, I got a pasture and my taxes just went up $2,000. So everything we do has a consequence, and everything like chip sealing that we delay and put off has a big consequence of what we're doing. And we need to be mindful of that.
No, and I agree. And I know the big thing that's always comes up is the cost of the oil, because I mean, the gravel, we've got massive piles of it. But yeah, my street hasn't been done, good grief, 7-8 years.
Mayor,
Yes.
probably.
I do believe we do chip sealing because they do it in July. We did it in July of last year. They do Harrison, Jackson, Tacoma, 12th Street, Kearney, Irving.
Well, that's,
Yeah, I was gonna say, because they did do it in front of my house last year, and I thought that there was some sort of schedule going forward.
There has always been, and thank you for that, Jackie.
And it used to be a 7-year cycle.
Uh-huh.
Every street had got chip sealed, a 7-year cycle. And then as Councilmember Hancock, you know, brought up, that dropped down to it, when they took it away from us for a couple of years there, brought it back in, that 7-year cycle went to almost a 12-year cycle. So, you know, the only way to get back to a 7-year cycle at that point in time was to basically double the budget, which means double the manpower, double the equipment needed, double the materials needed to do it, to try to get caught back up. And that would have taken, you know, several years of doubling to get that back down to so again, it goes with whether it's water or sewer, streets, delayed maintenance is added
Hurt you,
unneeded
yeah.
cost.
Yeah.
I was taken down, Jaime Alvarez took me down into the Ajo subdivision down there, and I was just, the streets are just absolutely falling apart. They're crumbling.
They are.
Just absolutely crumbling. We call it alligatoring, it looks like the back of an alligator. There's chunks of asphalt like this. They're just sitting there, ready to be kicked out. And there's actually a section of street that he asked if we could repair it. And I said, absolutely. It needs to be repaired. I mean, we just can't throw gravel on it, so we're actually going to peel it out and he has some money to put some asphalt down, but we're going to peel that out and rebuild that section of road as cheaply as we possibly can. But it's really unnecessary. If we just have good maintenance practices, whatever infrastructure it is, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a building, it's good, maintenance, practices and funding to take care of those things, to rainy day fund for a larger project in the end, but ongoing everyday maintenance, because everything has a maintenance
We
cost.
need to do that.
And if I could say on that, I know I brought it up before in the city council, but we also need to look at the heavier trucks, right? I mean, these residential areas, they're not made for heavier trucks. And we really need to look at that. There's a truck route for a reason. I mean, I'm in transportation, but so be it. But these heavy trucks do not belong in residential areas. One, for the road maintenance, it's going to crumble them. And another is safety, right? You got these big rigs parked on the side of the road, and it makes it real hard to look at, the traffic. And then you want to make a turn, and you're almost getting hit. So nothing was ever done on that, but hopefully going forward we could, really do something, and it's gonna help us. It's prevent these roads from crumbling faster than they need to.
Resetting the maintenance plan, the 6-year plan, or whatever it is, however we put that, we need to reestablish that wherever it's at right now, or figure out where it is right now. And
I think it's 7 years.
is it 7 years?
7 years. I saw it somewhere. I just don't remember where I saw it.
Yeah.
But, so part of your funding right now is going to, your ADA plan, right? Your
Right.
ADA repair. So a large portion of your TBD funds are going to pay for that, which takes away from other maintenance. Now, again, whatever we do, it's a balancing act, right? Where do we want to scale that back and put more money back towards maintenance and be more proactive with our pavements? As long as we are moving towards, and this is my philosophy and what I shared with HLA, as long as we are moving our ADA plan forward and we are making our replacements as necessary, then, technically we should be compliant in getting our city back into, ADA accessibility. So
I have a question.
go ahead.
So when there's an empty lot, right, and then somebody decides to put a home or whatever, isn't that owner responsible for building the sidewalk?
So that's my personal philosophy as an engineer, as a public works director, back again in my day here at the city, developments, especially up on the hill, they would go in and the developer would put in all the infrastructure and build the curbs and the sidewalks. And then what would happen was they would sell the lot. Somebody would come in and build the house. Of course, the first thing they do is they back the fully loaded cement truck over the sidewalk, crack those sidewalk panels, and they drive off, and house gets built, and we go up to do an inspection, and they say, well, you got broken sidewalk panels here, you have to replace them. Well, the developer or the home builder or the homeowner says, well, that wasn't in my budget to do that. The city should have done it. They allowed it. It's in the city right away. Well, so you get in this arguments, right? So the easiest way to do that is tell the developer sidewalks go in at the time the construction takes place, right? That way, before the certificate of occupancy is handed out, they've got to have that sidewalk in place. It prevents that early on damage and unexpected costs at the end. That's my personal philosophy. That's where I've always done that, and every agency I've worked for has put that in place, because I don't like seeing government money go back to make a repair that was not a government fund to begin with. Now we are taking that responsibility.
Yeah.
All right. So we've been at it for an hour and a half. Do you guys want to take a break?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Is this helpful? I mean, I know it's
Oh, yeah,
kind of really just broad discussions.
Yeah.
But-
Well, no, it's the beginning of a conversation. I think that's a conversation we need to have. And I think we're we're covering some important ground. And we may not always like to hear what we're hearing, but I think it's important that we do hear it. So. All right, let's take a 10-minute break.
Before my pins fails.
Getting old.
Had some great, interaction to up to date. I just want to say real quick, whatever we're talking about, whether on these papers, these are just ideas, right? And that's what we're here for, is to share our ideas so that at some point in time in the near future, we can come to a consensus of how we take these ideas and develop a plan with them, right? So I just want to make sure if the public's listening, these are not adopted. These are just ideas that are out there. Some of them are my ideas, and my ideas aren't any better than anybody else's ideas, right? And I always like to tell my staff, and Jackie can attest to this, my first day on the job, we had a staff meeting, and I said, if you have an issue or a problem or a concern, and you come into my desk and you say, Jim, I have an issue, I have this problem, I have this, I expect you to have a solution as well, or a number of solutions as well. Otherwise, you're going to get my solution. And my solution might not fit what you need. And I think the same thing applies here. These aren't my ideas. It's everybody's ideas, and the solutions will come from all of us, not from one person. And when you focus on one person's solutions, that doesn't necessarily fit the needs of the community. So I just wanted to say that as we start to go forward here, and I probably should have said at the beginning of the meeting, but I think it's important. This is a team. We need to build a team, and we need, team input. And without team input, something's going to be left out. So I wasn't sure if I had the personnel policy on here. That was a big thing back in my day. If it's been adopted, if there is one now.
We have one.
But I still think that some of this applies in here. We got to get the us versus them, get rid of the us versus them mindset, right? And I think there's still some of that's going on, right? Us as city staff, them, city council, right? We got to get rid of that. And then, are we providing good training, good assistance to our employees? Because they are, our most valuable asset, right? And again, we talked about this earlier, our valuable asset, needs to develop that institutional knowledge to help, the next generation come through.
Also with that, if I may, with that being said, I also believe that as employees start at City Hall or other departments, I believe they also need that training. And hey, this is the personnel policies. These are council's, goals. So maybe you never know, right? You never know they're doing something. Hey, it clicks, right? Let me see if I could do this a little bit better, or hey, we're doing this wrong. It's not what council set forward. So
right, and if we go back to that, just again, real briefly. For our water system or our sewer system, and I'll pick those out because that's the ones I'm mostly familiar with. But I asked the police and the fire. The first question I asked of the both chiefs is, how are our certifications, right? In the water and sewer, how are people certified, right? When I read that, our city is required to have a level 2 distribution manager for the city water department, and I have one person, and that one person, he goes on vacation. Are we in compliance? Do we have somebody here that has that knowledge that the state requires? No, we don't. That's the way I read it. So I encouraged at the time all of my staff to get those certifications. That cost us money, right? It also makes them very valuable employees to another department, another city somewhere. But I felt it was important to the residents that every one of our staff members had those certifications, so that if, in the event that the supervisor are gone, assistant supervisor are gone, or as we turn over, as our folks age out and retire, we have that back behind us. And right now, I think we've gone backwards. I think we only have a limited number of people, one or two, that have those certifications necessary, right?
Well, and I think also, in the question of the personnel policy, I was working at an organization at a company last night, and they had a new hire, just graduated from Central. The only diploma, the only certification she had mounted on the wall was, student leadership at Central University. That's all she had yet because she just graduated with just their number one big thing on her desk was the personnel policy of that business. And it was written very clearly on the cover of that. You are responsible for knowing this, and this is our personnel policy, and explaining it's pertinent. This is how we work here, and you need to know this. You need to be very familiar with this. And I don't know that we have been doing that well. I think the intention is there, and I think at times we've done an excellent job. At times we've done maybe a less than excellent job. And, I think it's equally important, the personnel policy, as the council policy. We get new council members in there to know what is council rules and procedure. How are we supposed to behave towards each other? How are we supposed to behave towards the public? To make that very clear. And again, it comes back to what our youngest and most recent council members have said is an onboarding process that we really need to step up. And since they got on, we haven't really done a lot of work on that. We've updated council rules of procedure. It still needs some more work, but the council rules of procedure, we've taken a look at some of that, but there's work that needs to be done on that. And we have the potential for a number of new council members. And I mean, we're definitely going to have one, but we've got potential for some brand new council members coming in this next January. How are we going to help them get up to speed? How can we prepare them for what they're looking into? Definitely get them involved in the budget process so that they understand what we're doing. But what about the other stuff? And I know we say, yes, it is on you to learn this stuff, but how easy do we make it for them? And what kind of process do we have in place for them? So whether it's an employee or a council member, I think that we really need to step up our game.
Let me ask this question to the council. Are you guys all taking advantage of the training for council members that I know Councilmember Hancock has it, that's available?
Oh, yeah.
My first year, I made a goal and I got the 30 points. So I do have those. So I need another 30 points to
Yeah,
do
we
the
can-
next step.
yeah.
So, and as those trainings are ongoing, we should make sure that our folks are going to those, right? Because laws change, right? Policies, that from our overlords in the federal government and the state government, hey, that say, hey, these are the things you should be doing, as well as from our insurance carriers. What's our insurance carrier? What are they mandating now, right? So we need to make sure that we are up to date on that. And if you don't think it's important to me, I hired Shane Fisher as an engineering technician. And look where he's at, right? That was training. Delilah Sear was my administrative assistant. City clerk, finance director. Now it's the CFO. You take Jackie with Shane. She was just an administrative assistant. So that's important that we provide those training opportunities, and those training lead to advancement opportunities for our employees. And so, the big thought is, you need to hire within. Well, if you're not bringing your people up, then they're not qualified. So then you got to hire somebody from the outside, and then that sets off all sorts of, issues, drama that might not be necessary, right? So,
I certainly think that that's what we've been seeing for the past 2 years. Almost 3.
so anyway, so that to me is the most important thing. Good mentoring, good training, and get those people ready to take the next step in their career and become the leaders, right? And whether it's the public and the city council or the city staff.
Absolutely. Good point.
So again, we get into promote reserves for capital projects. We talked that to death a bit today. It's how do we do that, right? We've got to figure that out. Whether it's, everybody hates to say it, and this is not set in stone, but utility rates, right? That all boils down to utility. Now, I think one thing that's going forward for us here, probably the next couple of years, are those bonds are going to retire, right? That we have out there that are paying for Monson, right? That's a big annual hit. There's no doubt about it. I don't know what the number is. I used to know what it was, but let's just say it's $500,000 a year, right? So when 2008, right before the real estate market crashed around here or in the entire country, we had a knock on our door at City Hall. Gentleman comes up, hey, I'm looking for some real estate, a large parcel, alongside the freeway. At the time, the city, there was the parcel there at the outpost. There was the I don't think the ones across the street were for sale yet, across the freeway, but then the other one was the Roberts property down on exit 67 off Midvale. And it turned to find out that that was the property buyer for Lowe's, right? And they were looking to build a Lowe's store here in Sunnyside. And they went to one of the property owners and they made a deal and they offered him $2.7 million to buy their property, 38 acres. And the landowner came back with his right and he said, well, I want 3.5 million. And you got to remember, the market was crashing on real estate and they walked away. Well, guess where they built that store? Union Gap.
Union, yeah.
Now, that store was a $20 million a year sales store. So let's just, for simple math, 10%, which is really only 8%. So this is 8% sales tax. It's $160,000 a year. Monson costs us 4 of those stores a year with sales. That's, if you had 4 Lowe's and all the activity that goes around all that, that's what we're paying out there. And we don't have that here. You know, it's just our money going out the door. So those bonds are becoming off here in the next, I think they were 20-year bonds.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right. And if the sale of this property continues to go through on the right trajectory, that'll be retired at the end of this
Right.
year. But
Right.
yeah, that's
Any look at all.
if it all goes through.
Right. So again, you know, I think that's one thing that's going to, in the near term or the near term future is, the city's going to be getting money back and not having to spend that money on those bonds. Right.
Mhm.
So, and then the next one down, obviously, is sell Monson property for economic development. This was as true net today as it was in 2009 when I wrote this. It's still sitting out there.
Mhm.
And we are actively, marketing it. We are actively working towards, selling it. I'm involved in that. And I think it's great. A wage benefit survey, and this was an idea, but I think, my understanding is the city wages have kind of maybe gotten out of control a bit.
Ballooned.
Yeah, ballooned, for right or for wrong. But I think that might be, again, necessary to take a look at. I know how you're going to roll back, but you don't necessarily roll back, but you freeze. Right?
But then that gives us, I mean, if we do that and take the time to do that, we did it once before. And what it does is then it can show the unions and stuff where we sit as a community as opposed to Ellensburg or like size communities. It helps us understand what makes sense for wages, because there's I think some positions that are probably lower waged than they should be. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to do again.
Again, I think,
I think it's the other thing that happens too is once you do that kind of a freeze thing and then you decide, okay, well, now we got to bring it back up, then it's 3 times the amount of money, so it's probably, as far as wages go, if you just limit it to the cost of living, I think that would be a better plan than to try a freeze.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ideas.
But there's different ways to approach it.
A lot of
sure.
approaches. And then again, I think we talked about this earlier, economic development, right? How important is that? Again, but where are our dollars to support that? How can we support that? Are there other incentives, that don't cost the city money, but may delay or help a developer come in to offset his costs so he doesn't have so much upfront cost coming in, right? So those are the things that we need to look at, and whatever they may be.
We do have an economic developer director program that's in the budget,
We don't have
but
anybody,
we just don't have the person doing it right now.
a person.
There was we talked about studies, right? And I can't remember the study. Teresa might be able to remember. What was the study that we put together that marketed to all the restaurants? And
Buxton.
the Buxton study.
Oh, that's still on a shelf somewhere.
It is.
Yep, absolutely. I think that was a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
The city paid for that, 2005, 7 area, somewhere in that range, just sitting there.
I don't think we ever used it.
Never used it.
I think the one that we've come closest to using has been this Roger.
Roger Brooks continues to
Roger
come up
Brooks.
and council at the time was very adamant that this not be something that sits on a shelf and gets dusty. And I think we have continued to pull that off and continue to use some of the elements of that. I don't think we've made adequate use of it. I think we could have done a lot better. And we can't use the excuse that, well, COVID got in the way, because that, okay, it's not in the way anymore, so why haven't we reactivated that? But you're right, we have these studies and we've spent good money on them. Let's take a look at what's in that and implement what we can. Maybe that should be work for our Economic Development Commission.
You know, and then,
Review those studies and
That might be a good plan for them. Absolutely.
so, you know, and just a real quick, what I will say about a public-private partnership on something, there's sometimes you have to be careful with that, because once you start involve public funds in a project, then that project becomes a prevailing wage type job to construct, and your wages go from here to here and the cost goes up. And so is that really a good use of the public dollar, right? I've seen that happen here. I've seen it happen in other locations. So you just need to be mindful of when we invite ourselves in and say, hey, you know, we can help you with some of this stuff, because that once becomes $1 of public money goes into it, it becomes a public project. And it's now subject to all of the laws that go with public funding. So just to be mindful of that. Again, you know, restart recreation programs. We've talked about that a lot today. You know, how do we do that? You know, and I think, you know, we need to look at what partnerships are available out there and what funding this city does have. But I mean, there was talk years ago about developing a parks district, right?
And that's come up a few times this
Right.
year.
You know, but you know, again, the Parks District, that's a tax on property that somebody has to pay for, you know, and then the other side of this is okay, you know, I just paid my property taxes and I had, you know, $100 a year go to the Parks District. That's just as an example. But now I want to sign my kids up for T-ball or baseball or whatever. And well, here's the fee. Well, wait a second. I just paid $100. Well, now I got to pay this other fee, right? And so I've heard this in my career as well. You know, we're low income. I can't afford to pay all these fees plus this tax. So what's that balancing act got to look like if you do go with the Parks District or do go with increased fees versus one or the other? Some way to fund these programs, right? So you've got to be careful on how that works, because you know there may be some folks in the community that can't afford either. Right. And they're the ones left out, and they may be the ones that we're trying to actually reach. Right.
so, and there may be scholarship programs or something like
Absolutely.
that available. One of the nice things about a parks district is that it's not necessarily required to be limited to city limits. It can be school district lines. It can be the port district, or however that can be defined. And so it doesn't limit it to just residents of the city of Sunnyside, and then anybody else gets to take advantage of that. It's kind of like the reasoning for why we did our TBD as a sales tax as opposed to a license fees, because everybody who comes into town gets and makes a purchase gets to help contribute to that. It's not just the people who, you know, are living within this little district here. So that helped us to be able to fund things a little bit better. But that's the advantage of a park district. It can be definitely bigger than just city limits.
We were actually looking at, I can't remember how big a parks district we were looking at, but it was a fairly large area outside the city limits to bring folks in to help pay for that, spread that cost out. So,
You know, using the port district boundaries would be, because that goes clear down to the Columbia River, you know, a little skinny piece.
1 mile.
Right.
But that would probably be, like you want to say, to spread it out over a larger population.
And then my next item on here is regular council workshops. And why are those important? Right. You know, and from staff standpoint, it's like, oh man, another workshop, you know, but that's how again, you've heard me say this, we are in the information business, right? And so we get to hear from the council, the information they're hearing from the public. The council gets to hear the information from us of what's going on as we develop our programs, as we implement our programs, as we hear from the public. And so they are very important, right? Then you've got to have that interaction between council and staff, right?
Absolutely.
So that it's, you know, the process improves, the knowledge improves, the myths and the rumors go away. I don't like dealing in myth and rumor, right? That you ask me a question, I'll give you the answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that I don't know the answer, but I provide you the information at some point in time when it's available. And that's what the public needs. The public needs to know that council is on top of things, that they're holding the city staff accountable. That accountability is all we have really to stand on at the end of the day, right? And it shows in the work we're doing. That's how we show our accountability to the public, that we are meeting their needs, that we're spending their money wisely, that we are taking these actions. So,
And I think the other thing to keep in mind too is most people in the community have ideas of what should be done. They don't necessarily have ideas what can be done or what's legal to be done. And it is our role as council members to kind of help the community understand why we can't take this step, because it would be illegal, and be able to explain that to them. And in order for us to be able to explain that, we have to have that knowledge ourselves. And we come on here as novice council members, every single one of us, and we've got all these ideas and we're going to fix this and fix that. And it takes us a while to get up to speed to realize why things can't be done the way that we've dreamed of. And now we're in the position where we have to explain that to the people who call us. I'm getting it on the fireworks ordinance right now. I've got one individual who, and I sympathize. I really do. Last year just drove them absolutely crazy with the fireworks, and said, okay, hey, please understand, we have revised the rules, we've changed the laws. And then they got the paper out and they're saying, what's going on? Why is it that they're allowing the 5 days again? And I had to explain under state law. But if I hadn't known that, I would not have been able to give any information to this individual, and they would still be frustrated and angry. And so it's imperative that we understand. So that's why the workshops are so important, because we can then learn. And I think a little humility on the part of council members is the fact that we have to recognize that we really do need to learn an awful lot in order to do this job.
so I think most of us here remember Carol Stone. So when I started, brand new 2003, this gal comes up to the counter. I don't know her from Adam. And she's got this question. I mean, it's just this shotgun, right? I mean, it's just scattered questions everywhere, right? And so, took the time to figure out what she was asking for. Let's pull this piece out and put it over here. That's when this piece goes over here, and then focus on each individual. And I became the Carol Stone point person. And she was at the counter every day, right? And I kept warning my staff, you need to talk to her. You need to find out what's going on, or not just her, but anybody that comes to the counter like that. Because what I've seen happen, and I've seen it happen in multiple locations where I've worked, cities where I work, where you have that person that is not getting the answers from staff. It's not getting the answers from council. I mean, she wasn't getting answers from anybody, right? She was as frustrated as could be, sitting back here in the audience. Council just, that's just, her. Well, what I've seen this happen multiple times, that person eventually has enough and they run for city council, and then they get on city council. Well, now if you're the staff and you weren't responding to this person that's now on city council, guess what? She's going to come after you, right? But in Carol's case, she got the help and so when she became a city council person, she was very well informed because she was involved, right? And she was involved and she was getting answers. Council began giving her answers and staff began giving her answers. And so we need to be mindful of that. We need to be able to share that information, as the mayor said.
Mm-hmm.
So, when the new council members are elected, they're up to speed. It's a big difference. And yeah, there's always going to be, wait a second, you got to work within the confines of the government, and the government can only work a certain way. Regardless of your ideas, this is the way, it may take a while to implement these things. So that's just the nature of government, how it works. But, if people have information, they can make informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
Amen.
Again, that's, just starting out from the lowly person all the way to the top and seeing this in action.
Nobody cared about this community more than Carol Stone.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. As I review current city ordinances, we've talked a little bit about this, right? Deputy Mayor Gavon talked about, our looking at our Sunday City Municipal Code with respect to, code enforcement. But they all should be, looked at and revised. The chief came to me the other day. I said, Jim, he says, I've got the way they do commissary here in the jail now, right? The city used to buy things and the city ran the commissary. Now they've got a vendor. Right. And that vendor bought the materials from the city that the city already had on hand for sale to our clients and inmates. And but there were some items that they cannot sell. Right. They're just not marketable. The inmates don't want them. And so they came back and they said, hey, we don't want these things. And it's thermal underwear. Right. they don't want them, we can't sell them, you know, here you go, city, you can take them back. Well, so the question is, okay, do we surplus it or can we give it away? Well, so I go right to the code. What's our code say? Because I remember all the discussions we always had about surplusing equipment, this, that, and that thing. The surplus property ordinance was actually removed out of the city council. It was repealed. And so now it's all done by resolution. So, but again, you know, we need to look at our codes. Are they relevant? You know, how do they affect staff's daily workload, right? Surplusing, you know, how do they affect the public, you know, code enforcement, right? So we need to look at those and make sure that they fit our community, right? They're not outdated. We're back up to, you know, keeping current with the times and things of this nature. So I think that's, we should never lose sight of it. We should always be reviewing our current ordinances. Downtown development plan, again, that goes along with the economic plan. I think those two go kind of hand in hand, and we have invested money into, at those times, in those days when I was here, we didn't have money. You know, we didn't have these grants and loans. So the thought was local improvement districts to help improve the streets and the sidewalks and things of this nature. And that's always available. Local improvement districts are always available. The state allows them. It's a great way to fund things. And that does become a private-public partnership where the government funds the engineering of the project, and the homeowners or the business owners fund the actual cost of the project. So there is a shared cost, and it does become a public project. But and then it's paid out over so much a year for so many years, right? So that's always a nice little tool that's out there. I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with it, local improvement districts. That is a tool out there to develop not only downtown, but residential neighborhoods as well. So community outreach through bilingual communications is very important. You know, are we getting our message out, right? I unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. But, we need to make sure when we,
Well, that's one of the things that I think that we've really pushed and stepped up the game on. I think every notice that for city council meetings, events, whatever's going on that comes off the city Facebook page is bilingual. It's English, Spanish. We have worked in different ways trying to get interpreting services for council meetings so that anybody who wants to hear it in Spanish or English can. So I think we've taken some good steps in that direction. I know, I speak Spanish. I know several other council members do as well. And so that's helped us to be able to reach out to community members and talk to them in that way. So I think we made some real progress in that one in the last few years. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that there's further steps that we couldn't take. I think that's we've got to be constantly looking for new opportunities to be able to reach better. But we have made some steps, and I don't know how long. All of a sudden, I notice all of our notifications are being done in Spanish as well as English, and I don't know how long that's been going on, but I think it's a very welcome improvement. So.
And then here we go back into create parks and recreation district. Again, we talked about that. It's one of those things that, it's a social issue. Does it prevent crime? Does it not prevent, anecdotally, we can say yes, but, do statistics necessarily prove things out? But at the end of the day, it's good for the community. It's good for the kids. It's good for the parents.
It's a quality of life question.
It's a quality of life.
Back to that. And I think that's probably a more important question than a lot of times we realize. You want to have a community with a good quality of life. You want people to have good memories of growing up here. They want to feel good about growing up here. You want people to be comfortable raising their families here. And the kids coming back and say, hey, do you remember that time that we did this in the park and had that activity? They want to, and really it does build community spirit.
Absolutely.
And if I can, so a while back, I asked my son, right? In your opinion, why do your friends or people that might join a gang? And he's like, well, there's nothing to do in Sunnyside. They get bored. They want to fit somewhere. So, having recreation community center, it might not eliminate it, but it might reach, certain kids and certain youth. And, if it reaches 10 out of 100, that's
one.
it's worth the effort.
You know, the city has an airport. Does everybody know the city has an airport, right?
yeah.
When I first moved here, everybody's like, what? We have an airport?
We have Sunnyside International.
Sunnyside International Airport.
You know, and it's always airports are one of those, assets is, you know, build it and they will come. Well, not necessarily, right? So, you know, and I was talking with HLA and there's a potential, you know, it was always, how do we quantify how much airport traffic we have, right? Because that's always big, right? How much airport traffic do we have? What size of aircraft we have? Without sitting somebody out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 365 days, it's really hard to quantify how much traffic we get out there. But we have to maintain our airport. You know, we do get federal funding to maintain the airport and not only maintain it, but develop projects to bring in aircraft. But I was talking with HLA and they were saying that we are on the cusp of falling below the threshold of air traffic to continue to receive federal funds,
We
right?
need more hangar space.
Well, right. And I've heard this, you know, forever. We need hangar space. But do we build it and they will come, or do we say, hey, if you want to build a hangar out there, we'll help you support it or whatever? I know the port's very involved in it. You know, are we marketing our airport correctly? I mean, all these things, I think the city still has an airport committee, right?
Yes.
I think these are all discussed in that, but you know, it is an asset, right? It's a direct asset, right? And even if it's only for life flight, right? And I live right across the street from the airport, so I see it every day, right? I mean, I see what goes on out there every day. It's an asset that we need to nurture. We need to make sure it's being utilized properly. And if it's building hangars, marketing, whatever needs to take place, we need to make sure that it stays viable. You talk about pavement maintenance, you know, once an airport, you know, starts being underutilized, the cost to restore and repair those pavements is just astronomical. You know, if you just let it go for years and nothing happens, it's, you know, well, the city had let it go for years when I first came here. And I mean, the cracks were literally this wide across the pavement. You know, how somebody didn't drop a landing in there and flip the airplane over, I have no idea. And the city was receiving federal money at the time. But the powers that be at City Hall did not want to take federal money. Well, that comes with purse strings. Well, I said, well, like what? Making sure you have a safe, you know, facility. You know, it's not like they're going to come in and say, well, now you have to do these other federal regulations that may be just totally, bizarre and off the wall. It's all focused on airport. And so I took that money and we overlaid that airport and fixed those cracks. And now we've taken money over the years and we've expanded moved the taxiways away so we could handle larger wings aircraft and things of this nature. So it's something that we should not just, we don't need to focus a lot of money on it.
It's really an important asset to our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Additional service sharing agreements, you know, like animal control, right? So we had shared animal control, and I think the city's gone, you know, back and forth on this over the years. You know, at one time, then there was the shared IT services with the county. Those are the type of sharing agreements that I'm talking about. You know, how can we, you know, work with our other communities, other local agencies to share possible assets. So that, you know, we can build a better community and serve the community a lot better, and reduce everybody's cost, right? You know, I'm sure the city does online social networking, right?
Yeah.
Assure a long-term financial stability. Here it comes again. That's always going to reverberate through long-term financial stability through an active and comprehensive approach for financial planning. That's what we're here for, right? This is the beginning of that. We should never take our eye off the ball on that, no matter who's sitting in this chair. That should always be number one.
A quick question, since you pause, take a breath. Are we going to make it much past noon on this one, or is it going to be wrapping up? Because if we're going to decide to have lunch, then we need to get that ordered so that it's ready to go.
What time is it?
It's 11:20.
11:20.
I think we'll probably wrap up probably within an hour.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? You don't need a lunch break? Okay.
I'd rather
Answers your
have
question.
pizza.
No lunch.
Okay.
Let's save money.
There you go.
I had lunch yesterday. We're good.
We're good. We ate yesterday.
Right. a customer service tracking system, right? Or, you know, and again, this would go back to not only for the customer to know where they're at in the process that they're trying to get, whether it's a permit or whatever, but it's also a statistic that can come back to the city council to say, hey, these are the types of calls we're getting for service, these are the type of, you know, and so we can track that and provide that information back.
Can that be added to our existing software programs, or is that something that we've got to buy into and subscribe to?
You know, I don't know. I know the city had, and Jackie maybe will answer this. You know, we have that help desk now that's more for IT. So it might be a question that we could ask of Jafet.
Talking about complaints or?
No,
No,
like customer
customer
tracking, like
service.
if somebody applies for a permit or,
Oh, yeah, OpenGov has that. It follows step by step who's approved, what notes. So OpenGov does that.
so a customer could come in and say, I've applied for this permit, and they could check it, find out what the status is. Okay.
Yeah, and then we also have, I think OpenGov tracks complaints as well, like a code enforcement complaint. Everything's on there. Code enforcement should add notes, pictures, everything is available.
Perfect.
And I'm not sure. I know that Corey just sent out some
Mhm.
information on that. I didn't look at it in depth yet, but if that, are we capturing all that, right?
Mhm.
Not just the permits, but if there are complaints,
Yeah.
you know, are we capturing that so we can take, you know, action as necessary? So one of my philosophies as a manager is if my phone's not ringing, it's a good day, right? That means I've taken care of problems in the community, right? So that allows me to continue to
Kind of a
focus on.
double-edged sword, because it's either a really good day or they've just given up.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the last thing you want is the give up part, because then they're going to be in front of you folks.
Yeah.
And
Just-
you folks
just-
are going to be in front of
Yeah,
me.
just
So-
looking at Corey's report, I mean, one of the things, the records created, revenues collected, inspections done, permits issued. So I think it would be just simple, you know, you can figure out from permits issued, how many people.
Are we publishing that on our website?
But that's in his report, so
Not right now.
we haven't done that yet.
So maybe that's something
I'm
that
sure
we
he
should,
could.
we should be publishing, and, you know, as, you know, and when the public wants to see information, you know, here's how many permits we're handling and, you know, and
Yeah, and how much money
Yep.
we used to.
Yep.
To do that.
I think the more clarity we can get on that, the better. You know, people have the right to know that stuff, how their city's receiving money, and
Mhm.
okay. Here again, training for planning commissions, and I just put planning commission down here, but there, as we talked about earlier, all the other boards and commissions the city puts on, right?
They
Um,
all should be.
yeah, there's state level training and that they have to have.
Yep.
But,
Not just the open meeting laws. I mean, there's other
right.
trainings that they need to be taking.
and are we still using a hearing examiner for the final decisions on this? It's,
Yeah, we have
Okay.
done. Well, we've talked about it because there was one instance where as mayor, I had to kind of serve as judge, which was awkward for all of us. And I think we went back to, council decided to go back to the whole hearing examiner model because it just kind of takes some of the pressure off council members.
it does. It does.
And I don't believe we've had to use it since Trevor left.
Yes.
Then, you know, establish standards for internal, and external services, you know, whatever, you know, those standards may be, right? You know, we'll, there's a policy that says you will return all phone calls by the end of the business day, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, right? And those are the type of standards I'm talking about, where something that again, the public is aware that they've called, they're expecting a phone call back, they're expecting an in-person meet, which is usually more difficult than a phone call back. But, you know, those emails are responded to. Those are the type of things that, you know, we need to be aware of, that we are reaching back out, you know, where our phones just aren't going to voicemail and our emails just aren't going unanswered. Because as you know, all that does is it allows that problem to fester and fester and fester till it rises to the top, and then it becomes a big issue.
Could that be something that could be added to the personnel policy?
Go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
It could also be a directive, an administrative directive.
Mhm.
Yep.
But if it's in the policy, it's in writing. An administrative directive, absolutely, because that becomes the norm in day-to-day activity. But if it's in the policy manual, if you get a call from somebody, you respond in such and such a way, kind of like what you have to do with the records requests. You respond, here's a date when I'm hoping to get that to you. That just allows that person to know right away something, it's been heard.
Yep.
So,
You've already talked about, we talked about the community center and the special events at the parks. Consider priorities of government budgeting process. And I think this kind of goes to what Teresa presented earlier with the Eisenhower development, was it matrix, Eisenhower. So those type of things, we can, again, that's what we're trying to get to is our priorities for government. Develop, a parks master plan. Establish effective working relationships with others, the port, the hospital, the school district, chamber business. And I think the city's always done a really good job of that. We just need to continue that, and get into meetings where it's not just developing a relationship, it's coming out with action items that everybody can, whatever, the port or the hospital or school in the city, we all have a part and take our action piece and do something, right? Otherwise, it's a meeting for meeting's sake.
and that was going really well until the hospital fiasco, and the hospital kind of pulled out of it and it lost traction for a little while. I know that there's been an effort to revive that, even if the hospital hasn't wanted to participate. It's been the city, the port, and the school district. I don't know where the hospital is on it right now, but I know that there's been an effort to get that to happen and have regular meetings. So, the effort is there. The leadership in those organizations wants that to happen. I've spoken to each of them individually and they're pretty positive about it. So yeah, there's definitely incentive on each of those organizations to get it done.
Absolutely. So now we'll turn to the last, which is challenges, right? And I think everything we've talked about so far is a challenge, right? But in a different context, restoring our trust in our city government, right? Proof is in the action. A huge first step is to commit to doing our job as part of a team and supporting each other and putting away daggers, right? We should we shouldn't look to pick on individuals or blame individuals. Because what they say, when you point the finger at someone, you've got three more fingers pointing right back at you, right? It is a team effort, right? It's the public elects the city council. The city council, hires a city manager. City manager hires the staff, and everything should move up and it should move down, right? It's not just always a one way street. And so, if we support our lowest staff members and help them understand their job, they'll become a success, which makes your job become a success, which makes the council jobs become a success, which makes the city, take pride in and the public takes pride in their city. So, I think that's, obviously number one here is restoring trust in our government. That's why it's the first one listed on the page. Obtain other resources to complete our projects. How do we do that? Well, right now we rely on consultants. HLA's done a really great job of getting, those transportation and infrastructure grants. We have a group, the Colton Consulting. Our lobbyists that I've had a meeting with both HLA because I came across my desk. Colton was claiming this grant, HLA claimed that they got the grant, but so I'm sitting there, wait a second, I've got two consultants, I'm paying two consultants and they're both doing the same thing. All right, so we need to figure out who's going to do what the best and provide that service. And so we've had that conversation with HLA and with Colton, so that they're not overlapping services. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to support each other, because HLA has their contacts, Colton has their contacts, and so they may be able to, bring other items to bear towards getting another grant, right? So that it's not that they're working towards the same purpose, but they're teaming up and saying, hey, we'll use our resources and you use your resources, then we'll be able to possibly increase what we're getting here. So, other resources, again, it's like we talked about, LIDs, right? For funding, improvement projects in the city. Those are infrastructure improvement, water, sewer, streets. You can also do, park LIDs as well. So there's all sorts of ways to get around this. Then the next one is getting rid of negative reputation and maintaining positive image. Again, this goes back to number one, getting back to doing our job working together will quickly result in the above happening. We need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, right? We need to show people that we are on a team. Now, there will be some division, right? And maybe that division comes from, not providing the right information or not providing information to that person, right? And so that's how that division gets in there. So we need to make sure that information is provided in an open format where the public can hear it, where the council can hear it, where they can take action. And it doesn't necessarily require action when the item is brought forward. May need to go back for more study, right? And back and forth before things are ready to be brought forward. But it does help, so when that item does come back, is it a majority that, not just a simple majority, but is it a super majority or is it a full majority of the council that supports it to go forward, right? Because when we have those 4-3 votes or 3-4 votes, that, whether that's right or whether it's wrong, right? It does kind of show some divisiveness that we're not on the same team, we're not on the same page. It doesn't mean, one party was right, one party was wrong, but when we bring legislation to the council or the council proposes legislation, that information is shared. Everybody understands what it is. And so the community can come, oh, that's what they're doing. That's what this means. Okay. Yeah. Now, is it something that we can support? Right. Here we go again, giving hope to our parents and the prospect of a bright future. This is again, quality of life. Absolutely. Every opportunity we get, we need to be spotlighting as the positive things that youth are doing. And not only youth, but, the rest of the community as well. But kids will gravitate towards whatever gets them attention, good or bad, especially nowadays, right? We got to get them away from their phones and say, okay, this is, be involved in your community. Do good things. And we do good things and the city sees us do good things, you're going to get rewarded. Budget. And here we're going to develop budgets with unrealistic assumptions, operating in quote unquote management by crisis mode, trying to recover from turnover or unfilled positions. All this results in inflated costs and expenses. Use realistic goals and objectives to develop your budget. As things calm down and smooth out, and we have more long-range planning time to long-range planning vision and plan the monetary impact will be mitigated. A good solid plan developed across an organization will also build cooperation and buy-in. So this, food for thought, but that's how we should approach budgeting. Labor and personnel costs, this is partly addressed by the above comment, but, we just need to make sure our costs because labor costs always go up. They never go down. It impacts potentially the quality of individuals you hire, right? Or don't hire. Those are all costs that we need to be able to justify and make sure that we have a good financial picture going forward. Reserves, same thing. Develop goals and objectives for reserves that lead to good fiscal management to increase and maintain a reserves for a healthy level. While recognizing that they are drawn down, there will be future impacts on the public to rebuild them as we draw those down, right? You whack them all out, all of a sudden now you don't have any money and something big comes up. Economy, develop goals and objectives to help grow the local economy and do not hinder development. I think that's pretty high on the list. I've had phone calls from developers here this week. And they're super excited about their projects. And I have meetings set up with them next week going forward because they've called with the concern. Hey, the person I was talking with on this project is no longer there. Who do I talk to? Okay.
Yeah, I've given out your number quite a few times over the last couple of weeks. People are texting me while I'm on vacation, saying, hey, who do I get in touch with? Can you help me give this information? Well, I'd love to give you that information, but that's not my job. I'm not allowed to do that. Here's Mr. Bridges' information.
Absolutely. And that's the way it should be, right? Someone comes to you, hey, I've got this idea, point them at staff, right? That's staff's job to handle it. I mean, you can be involved in it, you can walk in, you can do the introduction, you can sit in the meeting, all those things. But one thing that we have to be aware of is when you say something to a developer or whatever, are they saying, hey, for an example only, the mayor said I could do it this way. Well, and that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily meet what our code says you have to do, right? And so we have to be careful of, misleading statements or misleading directives and how, where's that information coming from? So always point them to staff and staff will get them in the right direction. Then staff will come back to council and say, this is the project. This is, what we're asking them to do. And this is where it says they have to do this in the code. But, again, then this gets into modifying that code. Is our code proper for economic development? Does it make sense for the developer, well, they're saying I got to do this. Well, I don't know. I don't have to do that in XYZ community over here. So I'm just going to take my money over here. Right. I used to have a saying when I was here that, if I make it, my job is to make, work with that developer when he comes in so that I'm not hindering his development. He spends his money, he makes his money. Chances are, what's he going to do? He's going to spend his money again in the city because he knows it's a place that can develop. And that's the way we should look at things is, is that developed? Because they're in the business to make money, right? And we shouldn't never forget that. And obviously they always want to maximize their dollar. So they do come in with some low ball stuff that, hey, that's just not quite going to cut it here. And I don't care what city you go to, they're not going to allow that either. Right. So but they need to make a healthy profit. They make a healthy profit, they'll reinvest in our community for the next project they have. And that's something we should always be aware of. Crime related to drugs and gangs, it's something that was in my time. It's still here today. It's something that we, are always facing a challenge with. And whether the curfew that was just adopted has to do with that, it's certainly a tool to help, nip that in the bud. But those are the type of policies and things, goals that we need to develop to address some of these things and certainly work with our employees and staff and law enforcement. Again, the stormwater compliance and assessment fees, we just said, it's one of those mandates that we have to deal with and we're working towards it. Street maintenance, so we talked about that. Again, the community center always pops up throughout here. It's the community center. Business development, we talked about that. Enlarging citizen ownership in the community. That means taking ownership of the community, folks. Don't just be, it's fine if you just want to, live and go to work and do all those things. But, the ownership I'm talking about is being proud of the community, stepping up and helping where help is needed, right? Not necessarily financial help, volunteer help, other resources that you may have that can help the community, help your neighbor, whatever it happens to be. Fighting apathy, that's always hard, fighting apathy. That's this other person's problem. That's the city that's always been that way. We need to try to nip that in the bud. Then always dealing with, federal, state, unfunded mandates and voter initiatives. The big one is going to be public defense, right? It's a big cost. It affects our local court. That's coming down to, we've got to figure out all that because, when I was here before, it was nothing to think of that the prosecuting or the defense attorneys were handling 1,500, 2,000 cases a year. And now the state Supreme Court came out and I said, I think it's got to be less than 200 they can handle a year. And in those days it was 2,000.
Yeah.
It was just something that just recently came out from.
Yeah.
Right, just a new law.
Supreme Court, state Supreme Court says, nope, can't be that way. So that's going to be a trickle down through the state to us. As we run our court, we have to provide defense services. And then again, at the very end, developing the Monson property.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's that. Again, this is food for thought. If you have other ideas, other things you want to talk about, certainly, as we go forward in the process, write them down, share them with me so that, we can address them the next issue. And then, I would ask that you take the time and kind of go through these. And then if you want to, highlight the ones that you think are a priority so that we can start compiling this. So the next meeting is more focused, right? Because
I have a question, having been gone for 2 weeks. Where's the sale of the Munson property? Is that still in process? Are we looking positive? Have they met all the requirements?
So an issue popped up on the title, that there were 3 things on the title. that we need to deal with. One of them had already been dealt with. It was the city had a judgment, and Jackie can help me out, for a public records request that was unpaid. The city had a judgment against them. It was $17,000 and some change. So, we looked at that one. Jackie was able to pull it up. Yes, that claim and judgment had already been paid. So that, the attorney is aware of that and taking that, working that to get that off the title. The other two items that were kind of combined was a former prospective buyer there has filed, supposedly, I don't know how it's been filed. The city attorney's trying to figure out how it's been filed, who accepted service on behalf of the city, but a notice of lien on the property for $10 million. So we got to figure out how to get these off of there, because the property owner has already come back to the prospective property buyer has come back to the real estate agent and says, I don't want to put any more money into this until we feel,
Okay.
how do we get this off?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious how some of those other events have impacted that sale and where we were in that process.
So the attorney is aware of them and they're dealing with them. The attorney did like I did the first time. I got it late in the afternoon on the email. You see this judgment and you see these other two court documents, you think it's all related, right? Here's the judgment and here's these other court documents. Well, it wasn't. So you had to look, and when I sent it to Julie, I hadn't heard anything back from her in a couple of days, but in the meantime, I had a chance to read it and I said, no. The judgment's over here. These are two separate items and she had done the same thing. She just briefly scanned it while she was traveling, hadn't had time to look at it. So now she's, Julie's working on figuring that out and how do we get that off, or was it properly served? Is it a proper lien against the city?
Or is it just another distraction?
Right. So we're working towards that. Then at the same time, we did get another letter of intent or email of intent from a group that wants to purchase 30 acres and put a solar farm out there. I think it used to be a lease and now it's gone to now they want to do a full purchase on it. I've been working with the real estate agent to talk about that on the negotiation, how we want to do it. There was a low ball offer, which is below I think the current price is $60,000 an acre. I think the city's asking for it for the Monson property, and this was substantially below that. So we got to figure out, to me, and I think it's a viable project. And there may be other ways around to get the money out of the person other than just the cost per acre. So we're working on that.
I'd like to see it go in different rounds. That's a discussion for an executive session on that.
So
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. So. All right, any other questions or comments for the good of the cause?
No, just thank you.
Thank you for that. I do find it kind of surprising that you put most of this together for 2009 and how much of that is still relevant today. Some of that indicates that we haven't made a ton of progress, and some of it indicate that the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think both of those are relevant statements here. I do appreciate the time that you've taken to dust that off and bring it back up into modern times and whatever the changes have had to be made. I do also appreciate the fact that on some of these areas, the city has made progress. The city has made attempts. We've had discussions on these. Whoever was in charge, whoever was the manager at the time, every manager has brought things forward that has helped us move forward. So over the last, good grief, it's been quite a while now, but 25 years, or well, 15 years, sorry. We've seen progress. Okay, we've done some things. We've responded well to certain situations, and other things we've tried and it's been an absolute failure, but now we know one more thing that isn't going to work. So this was the beginning of a good conversation. I thank you everybody for being here. I know it's probably not everybody's favorite activity for a beautiful Saturday in the summer. So you've taken some time out of your schedule and I appreciate that. We will have to continue this conversation, and it'll probably happen in August when we start the budget talks, because we're going to have to go back and revisit the discussion here and start clarifying some things when we start talking about budget. So whoever is sitting in your chair at that time is going to have to take a good look at your notes. So hopefully your notes are awesome. And then we're going to have to continue the discussion. So thank you so much, everybody. Reminder, Jackie, we do have an executive session for Monday at what time? 6?
5:30.
5:30 Monday night here, executive session. And that's set up for what? 20 minutes, an hour?
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Action after.
15 minutes with action. All right. Just so that we're all on the same page. We'll see you Monday night.
Okey-dokey.
We are adjourned.